Okay, but like new drapes? New drapes. Yes? No? Mm? Hello, loves. My name is Wendy Weather. I am the history drag queen, and today we're talking about the fall of Rome. But first, I'm gonna have to do a costume change. I put on this costume thinking it was gonna be, right and tight like it always was. I guess I'm just losing a little bit of weight. I don't know, but it won't stay up. So I'll be right back. Okay, I'm still kind of on theme. This is one of my older, Greco-Roman, tunic things. I guess Wendy is Sparta's too. I'm gonna have to tailor her up or something. That was crazy. Anyway, welcome back to a new video, my loves. And today we are talking about the fall of Rome or the fall of the Roman Empire. Over eons and millennia, empires rise and fall, and the Roman one is no exception. But Miss Wendy, what was the Roman Empire? Well, the Roman Empire was a very powerful ancient civilization whose territories consisted much of the entirety of Europe, Northern Africa, and Western Asia. And throughout its existence, it conquered and integrated dozens of different types of people into its empire. The legacy of the Roman Empire's influence is seen in modern day culture with politics, societies, and some of its innovations, like its roads, buildings, arches, and even aqueducts and water innovations. And not just those, even literature and art. But anyways, today we're mostly going to be focusing on the Western Roman Empire, because the Eastern Roman Empire actually ended up becoming the Byzantine Empire, which didn't fall until 1453-ish. But I digress. Now, in 476, the very last Roman Empire, Romulus Augustulus, was actually deposed by a Germanic prince. But there are multitudes of different factors and reasons why the entirety of the Roman Empire fell. And just before we start, here's a brief kind of timeline overview of how that kind of happened. The first thing that probably marked the downfall of the Roman Empire was actually the crisis of the 3rd century, when the empire was actually split into 3 different sections: the Gallic, Roman, and Palmyrene. But then during that, Valens, who is the Roman emperor of the eastern section, actually was overtaken by Visigoths in Adrianople, which is modern day Turkey. 2/3 of the entire Roman army is slaughtered, including Valens himself. So, not an awesome time for him. But then after Valens dies, Theodosius I actually becomes, the emperor. But then he goes on a whole tirade and kills the Western emperor, and reunites the entire empire together again. But then when Theodosius dies, he actually splits the empire back in 2 and gives it to his 2 sons, Arcadius and Honorius. But then in 410, something absolutely crazy happens. Somebody let the Visigoths in Rome. Yeah, they just sacked the city of Rome. They were like, oh yeah, this is your stuff. Yeah, this is nice. This is nice. We're gonna take some. And then about 30-ish years after that, more Germanic and barbarian troops come in, and they actually sack Carthage. It was the Vandals who did that, which is why we call Vandals, because that was the name of the barbaric Germanic troop that sacked Carthage. So, there was a lot of sacking of cities and barbaric troops just coming in. There was a lot that was happening. But then, not only that, Attila the Hun is also hey, hi, but Rome actually is able to fight him off. So he actually didn't get in, but the Roman Empire was able to fight him off and push him back. And then a little bit after that, the Vandals were let into Rome and they sacked Rome. So the Vandals are now sacking Rome. Everybody is sacking Rome. We're just doing it to Rome. Everybody is destroying Rome. And then that brings us all the way back to Romulus Augustulus being deposed by the Germanic prince. So yeah. Now, that very incredibly brief, 2x speed of barbaric troops invading Rome and Rome being split into many different ways, let's actually dive into some key factors of why Rome, one of the largest empires, most powerful empires that have existed in history, fell. Reason number 1 being invasion from barbaric tribes. I mean, that's kind of self-explanatory. Yeah. It is the most well-known reason and probably the main linchpin of why the empire fell. I mean, even like giving you that brief overview, it was very prevalent of like, oh, it's because they were just invaded successfully several times. Kind of. After the year 410, Rome was under constant threat and attacks by different tribes and peoples, be it the Visigoths, the Vandals, even Attila the Hun. And the constant encroachment of Germanic peoples like the Visigoths and Vandals, and some very successful invasions, were kind of the nails in the Roman Empire coffin. The next key factor is actually economic issues and overexpansion. Now, because of these constant wars and invasions and Rome trying to defend itself, it created this overspending problem that kind of was a major issue of the economy, as well as a overtaxation, most likely because of the overspending, which just kind of divided the classes even more. Yeah, and then there became a class tension. It was a lot. But then also, because of those economic issues, they were dealing with a labor deficit. Mostly because Rome's economy relied on... Yeah. Because they would have the Roman troops able to conquer new places and expand territories and get those newly conquered people to be said slaves to work fields and tills and things like that. And then when Rome stopped expanding, they didn't have the plethora of, people they can command to do work for free. Thus they were not able to grow economically anymore because they were using and people they were, conquering and expanding all the time as said people. Next is actually the rise of the Eastern Empire. So Emperor Diocletian actually divided the Roman Empire into the Eastern and Western, but still unified. But they made like the head of the Western Empire in Milan and then the head in Byzantium, which ends up being Constantinople. Anyway, it made the empire easily governable. But then, even though they were unified, but, it was split into two people to easily govern both sides, they just kind of started drifting apart and separating and not really helping each other out when things get crazy on either end of the empire. And so anytime the West was like, in kind of state of chaos, the East was like, hey girl, you good? Like, are we over here? But... all right, you okay? Okay. And also, the Eastern Empire just kind of did better. They just kind of did better. I mean, so much so, the Eastern Empire just kind of rebranded itself and rechanged its name to the Byzantine Empire. When Western Rome fell, they were like, oh, well, we're just like the Byzantines over here. We're just chilling. The next factor is actually government corruption and instability. I mean, diva, it is wide knowledge that the Roman Empire was corrupt as heck. As well as even being a Roman emperor was very dangerous. Because the Praetorian Guard, the people who are like, supposed to be protecting the emperor, sometimes would be just like, yeah, no, this guy, he's really not the vibe, we're just gonna murder him. Yeah, being murdered by your own guards. Crazy. And they would just instill new sovereigns at will. Be like, our new boss, yeah, don't really like it that much. All right, who's the new boss? Yeah, you guy. Okay, all right. And they would do that so frequently. So that's why there's so many Roman emperors and things. You're like, what? Why is there so many? Because that. So much so, they even auctioned it off one time of like, hey, who wants to be emperor? Highest bidder. Yeah. And the political craziness even extended to the Roman Senate, which had its own political instability and widespread corruption going on, as well as like just their own incompetence, just kind of meh. And as the situation got worse, Roman people and citizens just lost faith in their government and just kind of didn't trust it either way, no matter what, affiliation or viewpoint people had. They just didn't trust their government anymore. Anyway, the next factor is actually the rise of Christianity and the loss of their traditional values. Some historians have actually argued that a rise of a new religion, being Christianity, kind of was a little bit to the downfall of the Roman Empire. So Christianity displaced the polytheistic religion of the Roman Empire, which viewed the emperor having divine status and shifted the glory of the state to a sole deity. As well as popes and church leaders got an increased role in political affairs, which just kind of increased to the confusion and kind of corruptness of it all. Now, most scholars and historians actually suggest this factor pales into comparison when it is, put against the economic and militaristic factors that were going on. And I kind of agree. I think maybe the religion issue was on the back burner, but I don't think, it can't be overlooked. I think that it was a small factor, but a factor nonetheless. In conclusion, there were a lot of factors and reasons why the Roman Empire fell. Me personally, I fully believe it's mostly because of the barbaric invasions between the Visigoths, the Vandals, and the Huns, and just kind of paired with some of the economic issues that they were dealing with because of that. Yeah, I'm very much the stance of they just got overtook. It just happened. Now, there's a plethora of reasons and factors historians can say of why the Roman Empire fell. These are just kind of the very main ones that academia and scholars kind of focus in on. And that, my loves, is the simple fall of Rome. Now, why do you think Rome fell? Put in the comments below. As always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and stick around because you just might learn something.